Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, January 26th, 2021. Moving on, almost through the month of January already. That sort of disappeared quickly. I'd like to have my time back, please. I think a lot of it was lost to, insurrection and worrying about the future existence of the United States. I'd really like to have that time back now. It has been so much better with Donald Trump off Twitter. It's unbelievable how much improved the stupid discourse that we usually have has been improved. Speaking of being banned from Twitter, I got notice of this last night from Greg, and I had to look it up because I didn't recognize the guy's name. I actually didn't know. But the My Pillow guy, which is how I know him. I mean, that's all I know about the guy. He's made this pillow, and I understand that he had some pretty incredible, I think, drug problems when he was younger. I don't know. And he his supposedly inspirational miracle story is that he got off crack and became a lunatic for other reasons, and also along the way invented a pillow, which is inexplicably very popular, even though it's filled with buckwheat hulls or something. I don't know. Anyway, he's been banned from Twitter because he's a crazy nut too, and he used his money and newfound wealth, I guess, to, I don't know how he wriggled his way into Trump world, and at the very end of the Trump administration was actually spending his time hanging around outside the West Wing doors, plotting various and sundry additional moves behind the scenes of Trump's attempted coup to take over the government, to which he was no longer entitled after the election. And it included all sorts of weird machinations, and there's really just no real explanation in the world why the pillow guy, who I guess used to be the crack guy, should be advising the president on anything at all. Even pillows and crack, quite honestly, I think he was unqualified to advise the president on. But he actually spent his time hanging around the Oval Office in the end. And anyway, he too never really gave up on the idea that he could talk his way into, somehow into power in the United States, which really was a ridiculous prospect from the get-go. He too banned by Twitter for not shutting up about staging a, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. There was some dispute about whether or not to call it a coup, or the technical terminology for it, autogolpe, I guess. But I think we're all on the same page when we speak about this thing. Anyway, so he's been banned, and his name is Mike Liddell. Is that right? So I got this note from Greg, which was a screenshot being circulated by Oliver Darcy on Twitter, a screenshot of real Mike Lindell's account suspended on Twitter. And I saw it, and that was all he sent to me. And, I'm supposed to know at this point that crazy guy trying to take over the government, what's his name? And I never even got that far with him. And I had to Google Mike Liddell. Oh, My Pillow guy. All right, I know him. All right, well, good. It's about time he was banned from Twitter. Let's see. Other Twitter chatter this morning. Oh, there's a little bit of everything, of course. The articles of impeachment were delivered and exhibited, as they say, that is to say, read aloud in the Senate yesterday. So a little bit of pomp and circumstance, that sort of thing, the pageantry, if you will, of the House managers marching across the Capitol through the walkway there and through the grand rotunda and into the Senate side of the building, and then being admitted to the doors. And one of those rare, exciting moments where you can watch on either on split screen, or if you have two screens going, you can watch on C-SPAN 1 and 2 covering the same event. C-SPAN 1 covering the managers waiting in the hallway to be admitted to the Senate chamber, and C-SPAN 2 covering the Senate inside the chamber preparing to receive the managers. Very exciting. And anyway, Jamie Raskin of Maryland, Congressman of Maryland, who was the lead of the House managers, did his job admirably, and read the articles aloud. They're short, of course, and the Senate now dismisses them to take order of the trial. And that, I think, they pick up fairly frequently, but it can be a quick decision in terms of putting things off until later, or deciding on a different date to begin the trial rather than starting it right away, and under what circumstances they will conduct the trial. Armando wants to come on at about 9:30, so I guess during our first break we'll have him call in and get things set up, and he wants to talk a little bit about impeachment. It is Tuesday, so we're awaiting a late second hour visit from Joan McCarter. We've got things to talk about, and I even made notes to myself from yesterday. Really, as I was writing things up for the Morning Post, I made a note to myself. Wasn't there something I was supposed to note from last time? And I actually did have to figure it out. And it was reconciliation. That, too, on the table. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking, no doubt, about the continuing saga of the organizing resolution and how the Senate will organize itself and its committees. We can talk more about the technicalities there. And the fight over the filibuster, or the future of the filibuster, if you like, as between Mitch McConnell demanding a promise from Democrats not to change the rules or interpretations of the cloture rules during the next Congress, and Chuck Schumer, quite rightly, not wanting to give that promise because he's trying to be honest. I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to tell you that we're not going to change the rules because you might make it absolutely necessary for us to change the rules. And somehow Mitch McConnell, in his magical ways, manipulates the all too willing media into believing that somehow this is Chuck Schumer's fault for not guaranteeing him how things are going to be handled during the next Congress. My own take on it, I guess, quite briefly, I suppose I could tell you, is I don't know where McConnell's coming to the table demanding that there be this promise not to trigger the nuclear option during the 117th Congress without a second part to this agreement. The only agreements that have existed in the past with respect to the nuclear option or any changes, any mechanism of changing the rules on the filibuster has come with two sides. One side promising to deliver enough votes that, against the use of the nuclear option that it cannot be triggered and successfully used to change the interpretation of the rules. The other side, though, also promising not to deliver the votes that would create the conditions necessary for the majority to think they had to change the rules. The Gang of 14 agreement that forestalled the first, I guess, in the current ongoing chain of uses or threats for using the nuclear option. Back in 2005, that agreement included just enough plus one or two extra so that in case they lost votes. It was 7 votes on either side, but there were 7 Democrats who agreed not to join in triggering the nuclear option such that the Democrats were, the Republicans at that point were in the majority. 7 Republicans who agreed not to vote for a nuclear option execution, that is to provide the 51st, up to the 51st vote in favor of changing the rules by majority vote. And in exchange, 7 Democrats agreed not to provide the 40th vote against cloture, such that there couldn't get to 60 plus in favor of cloture. So, in other words, 7 Democrats agreed not to filibuster judicial nominations, or at least specific judicial nominations, and 7 Republicans agreed not to change the rules in exchange. Now here, the demand was just don't change the rules, and then no promises to you about our pressuring you into feeling like you needed to change the rules. That was just entirely missing from the whole thing. Anyway, we can talk about that and the committee structure that was tangential to that disagreement later on, with either or both Armando and Joan. I think both will probably be interested. Let me use the time at the moment to take you in a slightly different direction. I mentioned to you how much better things have been with Trump out of the picture. Part of that is, of course, he's not the president. And, his views on governance, for instance, and actual policy under the Biden administration are going to be relatively useless. He's just not interested enough himself, nor, skilled or smart enough to comment on anything other than to say, I don't like this, that, or the other thing because reasons. And maybe he even skips the reasons. So they're not going to him for comment on that. And ordinarily, that's the sort of thing that a former president wouldn't really want to offer comment on anyway. So in this case, we luck out in that the press is I think trained not to go to the former president and ask. Although I think we know that former presidents don't do that because the press isn't trained and they keep going to them and asking, and former presidents have to say, I'm not commenting on that. And then we're all reminded of the tradition of not doing that. Trump would, of course, probably would comment on that. But I don't think he's made himself all that available. He's a lazy guy as it is. That's the reason he depended chiefly on Twitter for his communications, was he didn't have to arrange press conferences. He loves doing press conferences. He hates planning for them. But as president, you could simply kind of walk out whenever you felt like it, and everybody would have to cover you and you would have a press conference. As a former president, you'd have to stage something, and there's the possibility that you'll be embarrassed when nobody shows up, tries to cover it. So anyway, Twitter has removed his easy method of addressing everybody with his stupidity, and it was great. And I mentioned yesterday, Kamala Harris, while she was running for president, had suggested that that Trump be blocked from Twitter, that his account be deleted, and he be banned from Twitter. And it caused a sensation at the time, and I think now, certainly in hindsight, after having banned him from Twitter at this point and seeing how much better life in general was without him on Twitter, you can tell that was a great idea. So in hindsight, she certainly deserves credit for that. At the time, she deserved more credit for it. She really should have been, she should have been listened to, quite honestly, and it just wasn't. But maybe now as vice president, people will recognize that. But in addition to that, I think somewhere not only in my email, but parked in Pocket was a piece that our good friend Eric Postman had sent us at some point. It wasn't something that he had written on his own, but something that he picked up on and had, I guess, in pocket himself, which was of some interest. A 2016 piece from theringer.com, which I'm not familiar with, but and it's not WRINGR Ringer, but the Ringer, RINGER. Anyway, 2016, November of 2016, after the election, November 29th, Quitter. Yeah, that was probably a better name for it. Twitter can and should ban Donald Trump, all the way back in 2016. So, well put there. Let's see. The platform is not obligated to serve as the president-elect's bully pulpit. Still misusing, I think, the term bully pulpit in the modern context. It's not that it's a pulpit for bullies, which is easy to make that mistake, especially when you're talking about Donald Trump. But in the original sense, bully, like that was the bully pulpit, that was, I think, Teddy Roosevelt's name for it. And it wasn't that he was going to bully you from the pulpit, though I'm sure he was capable of doing so. He was not nearly the same sort of person as Donald Trump, but bully, like bully for you, like good for you. It's a great pulpit. What a great pulpit this is. It's so fantastic. That was the usage of bully pulpit. And we've we have our own understanding of the term, and it kind of fits the situation, especially with Donald Trump. Just sort of interested in how she puts it here. I mean, I guess there are better or other things that we might spend our time on that are higher priority. But I wanted to at least give credit to this, not only to Kamala Harris, but to our writer here, Kate Knibbs, I guess. Knibbs. I doubt she pronounces the K in Knibbs, but you never know. President Donald Trump, or President-elect Donald Trump, now former President Donald Trump, loves Twitter. He said so. So that's how you know. I love Twitter. It's like owning your own newspaper without the losses, he tweeted in 2012. Twitter isn't like owning your own newspaper, though. Trump doesn't control Twitter, and in fact, he must abide by its rules. So she was wrong for about 4 years on that one. And the platform shouldn't love him back. Vanity Fair wondered last week, again this back in 2016, if Trump should be suspended from Twitter, ultimately concluding that he should not. So, good thought, bad conclusion, Vanity Fair. The bar to ban Trump is, of course, absurdly high now that he's about to become the nation's next president. Even if there were a case for his suspension, Vanity Fair wrote, this is the wrong conclusion because the case for his suspension is strong. Twitter has written its rules and terms of service to give itself enormous leeway for whom it bans and why it bans them. The company's microblogging service is the preferred method for the president-elect to spread destabilizing falsehoods. Did that get any worse? Propaganda glorifying imaginary accomplishments. And proposals to strip people of citizenship, we forgot about that one, for exercising their constitutionally protected rights to free expression. If Twitter wants, this could be grounds for expulsion. And I guess it should have been. Imagine, I wonder how the 4 years would have gone differently without Twitter for Trump. I mean, it can't be the fact that it would have just gone as quiet as it did now. It's just totally different circumstances. But even when he was still president, it kind of went quiet. But of course, he had tried to pull an overthrow of the government, a violent insurrection against the legislative branch anyway. And that probably changed things a little bit. Well, let's see. What else has she got to say here? Twitter's original moderation policy was basically this GIF, which is in here, and you might pronounce as GIF. You'd be wrong about that, but we'd love to note that that's the case. It's linked. I don't know what it is. It's the Amy Poehler, I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom from, what is that, Mean Girls or something like that? Okay, well, I guess that's just too much concentration on the GIFs and explaining everything by GIFs back in those days. But we modern folk know better than they did in 2016. Anyway, it was the nasty daiquiri party to Instagram's and Facebook's prudish picnics. In 2008, co-founder Biz Stone shrugged off one of the company's first high-profile harassment scandals by insisting that Twitter was a communication utility, not a mediator of content, after a user complained about a persistent stalker. As late as 2013, the New Republic's Jeffrey Rosen was congratulating Twitter users for self-regulation after an anti-Semitic hashtag made the rounds. Within days, the bulk of the tweets carrying the hashtag had turned from anti-Semitic to denunciations of anti-Semitism, confirming that the Twitter sphere is perfectly capable of dealing with hate speech on its own without heavy-handed intervention, Rosen wrote. It's an odd compliment to Grok in 2016, the year the future president-elect used Twitter to broadcast an anti-Semitic campaign advertisement. Guess that's true. Bit of outdated analysis there, although it was outdated in 2016 anyway. So, I don't know how much longer we go on with this. It's not a short article and probably not the best use of the time at the top of the show, but I did want to bring it to your attention because I think it's a good find, and I wanted to thank Eric for bringing it to our attention some time ago, by the way. It wasn't all that recent that he brought it to our attention, but today's news really opened the door to reintroducing that one, so I'll have that one available for you in the roundup, hand that over to Scott later on, and we'll handle it that way. It's a good read, and especially so, I think, in hindsight. What else is actually in pocket up at the top today? Let's see. We have, more on the emoluments cases being dismissed, although not that much more. They were dismissed with very brief orders. I mean, really nothing to it. and no deliberation discussed in them, just a simple brief order, unsigned, a list of orders dismissing a couple of cases. So we didn't learn a great deal more about what their reasoning was, and it might be interesting to know because there was no note of any particular dissent in any of this, and I find it difficult to believe that the court was so united in deciding that emoluments cases could be mooted so easily. In fact, I'll refer you to this too. I think I might just hand over the reading to you at this point because there's just wasn't a whole lot more to report. The court didn't give us a lot of hints, and I thought that we might have more analysis by this point, and we really don't. All we have from the New York Times: Supreme Court ends emolument suits against Trump. The lawsuits, accused the former president of violating the Constitution by doing business with foreign governments, and no discussion here, or at least in the subheader of the domestic emoluments. Anyway, the justices dismissed the suits as moot because he's no longer president. It is rather amazing, and it sets up a real tough situation, given that, for instance, there's no chance that a partisan Senate is going to vote to remove him from office. It really leaves you without any ability to address an emoluments problem. I mean, it clears the way, clears the runway for all future presidents to do the same, although no one will have that same lack of shame gene, I don't think, as Donald Trump, but or he really had it in spectacular fashion. But, you know, between you can't indict a sitting president and the case becomes moot once he's not president, and a partisan Senate that just won't convict or remove him from office under any circumstances, or probably any president, really. I find it very difficult to believe that either side would give up at this point on now that they've discovered that they can just cover for themselves by simply saying no and just standing there and being willing to be embarrassed over it for some amount of time. But I just don't know what enforcement mechanism now remains with respect to emoluments, unless the case is brought immediately so that there's less chance that the president can stretch it out past the end of his term. I suppose if you're talking about somebody who has plans to serve 2 terms in office, I guess that's your only chance at catching them, making the case, bringing it, and working your way through the courts, just to get the chance to make your case at trial at some point in the second term about emoluments you think the president was taking in the first term. It's really incredible. And honestly, a huge victory for the strategy Trump employed and other presidents have employed before him of just stretching out the litigation such that it stretches beyond your term in office, and hope that the courts will moot it. And I guess he got his wish on this one. It's really rather amazing too, because it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the crime is ongoing. He still has that money. The fact that he's not president now doesn't really bear on the fact that he used the presidency then to extract that money and is still enjoying it. I really don't know. There's no discussion of the theory of the case, so the case for dismissal, other than the fact that he's no longer president. And I guess speaking of the fact that he's no longer president, just as we head towards our first break and set up our conversation in the next segment with Armando about impeachment and everything else that goes along with it, Republicans still insisting, of course, that the Senate has not got any jurisdiction to try this case because Trump is no longer president. All sorts of weird permutations involving themselves in this, including the fact that Trump was president when he was impeached. And that leads us to the next question. He was impeached as president, but he'll be tried as a former president. Even that label now something that Trump himself has embraced, having established his offices as former president. All presidents and former presidents, rather, do this. And it's federally funded, too, by the way. Just another perk of his that he shouldn't be enjoying, but is. But he's established what he's calling the office of the former president, which is kind of weird in a number of ways. You could have the office of former President Trump, obviously, but the former president, there are several former presidents, and you could fight about this. But this comes up, for instance, in the impeachment context, because, of course, we're also finding Republicans fighting over what to do with respect to how the trial should be conducted and who should preside over the trial. Yesterday, we learned that the Chief Justice would not be, well, the rest of the world learned that the Chief Justice would not be presiding over this impeachment trial. You and I knew it for a long time because, of course, Trump was never going to be president during this trial, and now he isn't. And the Chief Justice presides when the president, the person who's president right now, is on trial. That's not what's happening, and so obviously a senator would preside over that trial, which is usually the case when you're not trying the president. So anyway, they announced that Senate President Pro Tem Pat Leahy would preside over the trial, although still no word, and I think Armando says he's pretty much given up on the idea of convincing them that they can conduct the trial in committee. I guess I'm not certain what their reasoning is for not doing it, especially now that they have made clear that the Chief Justice won't be presiding. Though, as of last night, still some unsolved mystery, some unanswered questions about exactly how it came to be that the Chief Justice wouldn't be presiding. No answers at the time of the announcement as to whether they had invited the Chief Justice and he had declined, or whether he was never asked in the first place. I mean, they really should never have asked him. But it seems like Democrats are somewhat interested in recreating some aspect of his first impeachment trial, and why they think that's necessary, I do not know. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. It makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We have engineered things perfectly here, and Armando is here now. We did it during the break, worked out all the sound glitches, of which there were none. Thank you, Skype. And we're ready to roll on this. I was introing the concept of the impeachment. Pardon me. My own sound problems cropping up on me here. There's nothing I can do about it. The microphone works fine. Too well, I might say. So I guess you can consider the trial sort of kind of underway, and that the articles of impeachment having been exhibited yesterday, the Senate is now under orders to come up with its own new orders about how it will conduct the trial. So yesterday's news, besides the exhibition of the articles, was the announcement that the Chief Justice will not be presiding. And I don't know whether Republicans were just pretending to be caught by surprise by this, or whether they really were caught by surprise. It's hard to tell, when they're playing dumb versus just being dumb sometimes. But like I said, we all knew that the Chief Justice wouldn't be presiding here, and I would have been very surprised to find out that the Chief Justice had any interest in presiding, and if he were even invited, that he might very well want to duck the invitation. Is there any further word? Have you heard anything about whether or not, did they clarify whether he had been invited and declined, or they simply bypassed him?
The reporting was that they consulted him.
Okay.
Leahy even sort of implied that he did the consulting. Okay. Which I don't know if I believe. I figure there probably were channels that everybody knew how to talk to each other without, by at the same time being able to say they didn't talk.
Yes,
And
okay.
obviously, the reporting was Roberts did not want to do it. I don't blame him. It's
No.
no fun. He's got actual work to do. But he wouldn't want to do it if he thought he had to anyway. But I would assume that his conclusion is the same as anyone who reads the provision. The president isn't being tried for impeachment. He was impeached. The president was impeached, but the trial is a former president. So any fair reading of that clause as a procedural matter. I actually had a stupid fight with somebody. Not a fight, a discussion. Usually I have fights, but it was a discussion. He said, isn't this conceding that you can't try him if the Chief Justice isn't there? I said, no, those are two completely different things. The argument for why you can't try him now is that he's a former
Well, that's the attempt anyway.
president, vice president, or federal officer. That's the argument. It doesn't matter who presides over the trial, because that would just be. I mean, I envision maybe Trump could make a motion requesting that the Chief Justice preside over it. But why would he do that? I don't know why, but I suppose he could make that motion, and maybe it would carry. And then they would tell Roberts to come. And I can't imagine Roberts not coming and saying, I'm not coming. And then what happens? I mean, because what if the Chief Justice said it to any invitation? Can he just say no? I mean, in theory, I guess he could. Or
I suppose so.
Do you send the Sergeant at Arms to arrest the Chief Justice to make him come preside?
That would be awesome.
But I don't think any of that's going to happen. It's going to be Leahy.
I don't think the Senate would want to do it. Certainly, for a number of reasons, not the least of which, of course, is arresting the Chief Justice with the Sergeant at Arms of the Senate is a pretty serious separation of powers issue, and would create problems and create a lot of hostility on the court in a lot of ways. Not the least of which would be hostility they would want to take out on you later on when you were busy claiming that you were the sole trier of impeachment and that the courts ought not to interfere. Well, that would have been great, but you interfered with us when you wanted to engineer things, and that, I think, opens the door to our interference in your sole powers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Who do you sue? Again, it's an interesting question, but let me tell you that what I think is more relevant is Leahy being announced. I think, first of all, I think it's a mistake to announce it so soon, but I also think it doesn't take into account something that you and I discussed: the standing Senate impeachment rules. Allow for motions and for committees and all these other things, right? Yeah. And you asked me why. I'm sure now they've sort of discarded the committee idea, mostly because of that. The committee vote would be by motion of the Senate, seeking a Senate order on procedure, or even the House could seek it. The House impeachment managers could have sought it and made a motion. And the motion would be, please refer this to committee pursuant to Rule 11 of the Senate impeachment rules.
Yeah.
That is not a debatable motion. It goes straight to the yeas and nays pursuant to standing Senate impeachment Rule 24.
Okay.
And let's say it splits down partisan lines, and there's 54 and there's 50 against. I learned from you that a motion needs a majority. I don't have it unless I have the Vice President of the United States sitting as my tie-breaking vote to send it to committee. So I would have said that I would have held on that until I decided how it was going to proceed, then had the Vice President available to break that tie and refer it to committee. And then she could go back to the White House.
She could do that. And I guess the option's still open to them if they wake up and decide that they wanted to do it. I mean, they could say, well, what I meant was, for now, for the exhibition of the articles, we didn't want to bother the vice president, and the next person in the chair, the next person with the greatest right to claim the chair if they wanted is Pat Leahy as Senate President pro tem, so he took it, and later on we're going to refer it to a committee chaired by Pat Leahy. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that would also meet the definition of having Pat Leahy preside over the trial. Fair enough.
I mean, maybe they're that clever. I'd be surprised, but it would be a good move, as for many reasons that we've talked about.
Just do it to disorient Republicans, quite honestly. to leave them spinning. I put them back on their heels one more time. What? I thought it was bad enough that you were going to have him preside, but at least you were going to do it on the floor. We didn't say we were going to do it on the floor. What?
Right.
Outrageous. You can't. We are.
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but the basic political reason I think for the committee is you're really going to make the best record there. You're actually going to take witnesses and subpoena documents and call witnesses. Like, today I watched Morning Joe and Mishi Alcindor asked Chris Coons about Trump appearing.
Yeah.
Like, I think she envisioned him as an advocate and making a speech to them.
Yeah, maybe he did threaten it at some point.
I mean, I'd say you can come make a speech, but that means you're a witness, and you're going to come sit and sit for hours with me examining you. But we're not going to do it here on this floor. We're going to pass a rule that we're going to take your testimony by video deposition. And it's going to be for 5 days. And then we will present what we want to present as evidence. And you can present what you want to present as evidence. See, this is the power of having control of the rules of the impeachment, which I think is escaping Democrats right now. People seem to forget. Remember, the House managers wanted to call witnesses and subpoena witnesses, John Bolton, etc.
Right. And
guess who ruled they couldn't?
The then majority of the Senate.
Right. So this majority of the Senate can rule that, yes, you do get witnesses, and here's how we're going to do it.
You can. And by the way, this would be complete fantasy at this point, but there's no bar to impeaching him over Ukraine again, even with the same articles.
I know there's no double jeopardy or anything like that for impeachment. So you could do it all again, and you could do it for emoluments, and you could do it for everything you can think of. But here, this is what we have here. And what I'm saying is good. We fought for Georgia, and we got the majority now. And, what are the advantages of the majority? It's not used often, but you get to establish the process by which the impeachment trial is carried out.
Right.
But to exercise that majority, it seems to me, you should not be ruling out the vice president presiding over the trial, because she has to be the tie-breaking vote if they maintain their party discipline. So I don't think anybody's thinking it through. I think they're sort of going to agree. They're going to come to an agreement with McConnell. It's going to be 3 days, a day and a half for everybody. They're going to run a bunch of video. There's going to be a vote, and it's going to be over. They don't want to do this. They want to do it just to say they did it. But they really don't want to do it the right way. David, the right way to do it was to refer it to committee, keep the Senate open, doing regular business, send the 10 senators there, and they meet at their discretion, 4 hours a day for 2 weeks. You build a record, and then you can have a 3-day presentation in the full Senate if you want.
Yes,
but they're not taking that opportunity, it seems to me, and I frankly think it's a mistake.
Yeah. Well, I think so too. I mean, honestly, having been denied the ability to really develop the record in the first one, you'd think that they would jump at the chance to do that this time. And I mean, zero discussion of committee, not even a discussion of rejecting the idea of holding it in committee. And sometimes it's difficult to tell on a procedure that's relatively rarely employed whether they know. I mean, you'd think somebody would bring it to their attention at some point, but as a staffer, sometimes if it's not already a part of the discussion, you're often reluctant to introduce it, especially if you think it's late in the decision-making process. But
it's early in the decision-making process. They don't have to do anything for 2 weeks. I think it's fair to entertain motions. Like, the schedule now is on, I think, February 2nd.
Okay.
Trump files his answer. And I suppose he'll probably answer by motion to dismiss. Right. If they're going to follow the process that you would in a court. And I believe the House responds on the 8th. And then there's probably going to be a day of arguments on the 9th. And then there's a vote on the motion to dismiss. And then presumably gets denied. By the way, you are right. They don't need if you're right, they don't need a majority. But what if you lose? Well, if you lose somebody, you lose somebody. So I guess that's it. But I mean, presumably you 50-50. Are you going to want that to be a 50-50 vote? Or I guess Romney says you can proceed. So you probably have 51 and you don't need the vice president on that motion to dismiss vote. But, to me, I'd say, hey, stay on standby in case we need your vote. You know what I mean?
Sure, right. You never know when it might come up. And also, I think that I don't know, maybe when the time comes, they can make the excuse or reiterate that, having Leahy preside isn't, it's not any kind of ironclad promise. If the vice president shows up, I mean, it's her prerogative to take the gavel if she wants it, even really even over Leahy's objection. And then if people say, but I thought Leahy was going to preside, and so therefore I was counting on you never having more than 50 Democratic votes on hand. Well, you miscalculated. You forgot that the vice president can come and exercise that prerogative at any time, and we don't really have any serious power to deny it to her. So...
I think that's true. She's the president of the Senate by constitutional right. So she can always tell, you know what, Patrick, I'm the president today. Thank you for being here, but now I'm in charge.
Yeah.
But it just strikes me a little bit not thought out. I would have said it's not going to be Chief Justice Roberts. I think that part's fine, but I would have left them in a little more suspense as to who it would be. Is what I said. So you have that motion to dismiss. As I said, probably decided the night of the 9th. But assume it's denied. Then they start opening arguments on the 10th. If there's no other motions, again, if it was me, there'd be a motion to refer to committee pursuant to Rule 11 of the Senate impeachment rules. Mm-hmm. But I think before you even get there, there's going to be announced rules and dates, and it's going to be 3 days, and half for you and half for them. And, there'll be rules about allowing video, which is fine. Good. Mm-hmm. You need video. I mean, I don't know why you couldn't be allowed to have video, but whatever. I mean, you could actually have a trial with the rules as they exist now, and just have particular motions to call witnesses if that's what you want, or subpoena documents if that's what you want. That's how it's been done. Then you have to break in the trial and do these things now. Though again, those are not debatable motions in theory. Yes. Even the motion to dismiss in theory isn't debatable unless the Senate agrees to allow it, and they apparently have. So that's why I'm saying there's going to be a day of debate or at least partial day of the debate on the motion to dismiss on the 9th, I would believe. So I think that's how that goes. But again, no one seems to be thinking very hard on this. I'm not at all. Look, I think they can do a great presentation in 3 days. That's true, or a day and a half, which is what they would be allotted to. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how Trump defends it, saying it was First Amendment protected. I mean, is that where he's going to go with this?
You know what? I have no idea. I imagine that'll come up, but I don't know that it's going to matter a great deal. In the context of a Senate trial, I mean, it's sort of a legalistic argument that might help you more in court than
it's like law professor stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, I figure he's going to say I didn't incite them. I told them to go peacefully protest, which he says a couple times in that speech. I read the transcript of the speech, and there's really a lot there. I mean, to me, I would play the whole thing. To be honest with you, if it was my case, I'd let people watch the whole thing. Someone could accuse me of cheating, of taking things out of context.
I see.
And then, there's all these videos that have developed of people reacting to the speech.
Oh, yeah.
Which are pretty clear. He said, let's go storm the Capitol.
Right. I'm here by his permission, by his instruction, and telling the cops that they needed to get out of the way because the president had ordered it.
Right, and of course, then you show video of the morass. I mean, I would almost do it in real time if I could. Basically make everybody sit through the 6 hours of what was going on. And at the missing piece that you and I have talked about is what was Trump doing from 2:20 to 9 p.m.
Yes,
that's where I think you need a committee.
Yeah, it would be great to develop that because. Yeah, I've got real questions that I have not seen anybody really in the press asking. I mean, maybe I'm missing it, or maybe it's not being reported because they're not getting answers, and so it's not good enough material to put in the 800 words you have for the day. But why no questions or FOIA requests to the Secret Service, to various national security organizations? What are the ordinary protocols? People who think back to 9/11 when the Capitol was rumored to be a target for attack. They then assumed that the White House, too, was vulnerable to the same attack because it's in the same general vicinity. And the president, when he left New York or wherever he was, where he was reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to the kids, not brought back to the White House, even though there's safe rooms there, but kept away from the White House for security reasons. And Vice President Cheney locked down. There's very clear protocols that would normally take place unless somebody, like the president, waves it off because he knows he's not at risk. And how does he know that he's not at risk? And that's, I think, the key question. Did he launch this attack on the Capitol? Yeah, given that he told specifically I guess, I mean, this is what the questions we'd have to have. Did the president countermand Secret Service protocols? Tell us about what the usual protocol is when there's an attack that you're not in control of, that's actually literally storming the Capitol and overwhelming its defenses 2 miles away. What was it that made you guys decide that there was no risk to the president, who was within walking distance of this same out-of-control mob? That's,
right.
I mean, the key question.
just to say, in 9/11, of course, Andy Card whispers to Bush that the towers were attacked, and then the Pentagon was attacked, and then they put George Bush in the air for the whole day.
Right. Yeah.
Because they didn't know where the attack would come from. Trump did.
Right.
An interesting addition to that point, though, is what did he do to stop the riots? Did he send in the National Guard?
Right. No, not only did he not send them, he refused to send them when they were requested. So he didn't offer them, and he denied them when they were requested. Right. Good point.
What did General Flynn's brother know? And what did he do? And what happened in that conference? And to this morning on CNN, Maggie Haberman, who is a Trump whisperer, reported that Trump was thrilled that the riots had stopped the electoral vote counting.
Yes,
which you and I have discussed, because now we know that he was calling senators during and after the riot to tell them to object to more more certifications of state votes because he wanted more time.
Yes.
Rudy Giuliani's phone call has to be in there. But then we have to ask Rudy Giuliani, well, who did you talk to? Who told you to do this? Now, if you tell me it's a privileged conversation with the president, you just told me then who told you to do this.
Yeah, that's right. I'd love
but
to
you
have
have to
answer.
say it's a privileged communication. I said, well, thank you.
Okay, right. That would solve that issue.
And of course,
love to know
Trump's own use of the phone isn't privileged, and he called by accident Mike Lee, who accepted the call from the president and handed the phone to Tommy Tuberville. What did he tell Tommy Tuberville?
We need to know that, and it's also a great point. Is of course, you would be making that point if you're doing it in front of the full Senate. I guess here's the advantage of doing it in front of the full Senate. I guess if it would be even better if you had control of the cameras and could do this sort of thing. I'd love to, in a courtroom setting where the cameras could shoot, at their own discretion, say, yeah, that's right. You called this senator and that senator. Put those senators sitting as jurors at their desks on camera, let them shift uncomfortably in their seat as you try and spell out exactly what happened here. What were you asking this senator to do? What was the senator's response? And, well, why did you bother calling the senator? They were under attack, and then they were sheltering from people who were possibly threatening their lives. I can't believe that when you got through to them, the question wasn't, how are you doing and what can we do to save you? It was, how can we get you to make this attack worse? Well, that's a good question, Mister. For a juror, it's a tremendous question. That doesn't usually.
I mean, those are all things. And then again, if Trump wants to appear, let's say he does it on his own volition, then he needs to be examined. I mean, on whatever he says, for example, that becomes testimony. Mm-hmm. He doesn't get to just argue as a lawyer. I mean, if you stand up and represent yourself, pro se, when you don't have to, you've got a lawyer that's already acting for you. You basically have to submit yourself to cross-examination. You can't then plead the fifth, for example. By the way, can I ask you a question? Because I just saw a tweet that I don't know what it means. It says on the impeachment front, Rand Paul may raise a POO.
Point of order. but yeah.
Oh, it's a point of order? That's all it is?
But he might mean, he's going to fling poo, and that's possible.
I thought, on whether impeaching a former president is constitutional. It could be a vote today that puts senators on the record. How do you get a vote on a point of order today on something that...
I don't know. I mean, I guess if today, under the rules, they are, I guess they may be bound to make some decisions about at least when they'll make more decisions.
Yeah.
So,
but why, can I make a point of order as something that's going to happen 2 weeks from now? That's interesting.
I guess. I mean, they might, that might be a good answer to it, is your point of order is not timely, and just say, you'll have to make it again when we start the trial, or they could entertain it. And they may say,
I would rule a point of order out of order for the following reason, if I may, because the Senate impeachment rules provide for a motion practice, and in fact, the agreed to rule, if it's already in place between McConnell and Schumer, already says that motions will be heard on February 8th and 9th. So if that's the case, then his point is out of order, it seems to me, because there's already an agreement by unanimous consent.
Okay. That's certainly a possibility for ruling. Or, that, or say, it's that not timely. The Senate is actually anticipating being briefed on that question by the parties, and will decide it more fully informed later. But, or they may say, it's not a point of order. The chair can rule directly on it, too, and just say, all right, so the point of order is that you can't try a former president or former official. I'm not certain how.
I'm assuming it would be broader. I mean, I'd hate to think that he's going to try to split the hair that thin. What's special about presidents versus, say, vice presidents?
I don't know. But, I mean, it's also possible, right, that he makes the point of order that it's unconstitutional to try a former officer, to which the answer is, under the Senate precedents, it is constitutional and is in order under the Belknap precedent of 1876, and they'll read it to him and then say, so that's it. You've lost your point of order.
That's a good point too. Say this body has determined that former federal officers are subject to
he can appeal
impeachment
the ruling and then lose, which may.
And then they say, I make a motion to overrule that precedent. I don't know.
I mean, you can. I appeal the ruling of the chair, and then somebody else can then arise and say, I move to table the appeal, and then they'll have a vote. Right. Now you've tabled the appeal. The appeal's been made, or the point of order has been made and rejected based on precedent. You appeal the ruling of the chair. The appeal is tabled, and everything proceeds as usual, and it's just a waste of time, and gets Rand Paul on television, and I guess he gets what he wants out of that. I've made trouble. I disrupted for an hour. Okay. I mean, I guess any time that they bring up something related to the impeachment, you could make such points of order. And I guess he could just keep making it over and over again until the chair says, this is the fifth time you've made this point of order. This is just a dilatory point, and it's not in order, period.
I mean, it has to be some impeachment business that's being done. I guess
you would
is when
think.
you can make the point of order, or it can just.
I guess you could make it any time.
What's on the floor, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, like I said, you could make it any time, and then the chair could simply say it's just not germane to the discussion.
Well, just bring it up when he's not there, and don't tell him you're bringing it up.
I guess so. Yeah. Well, so okay, he can disrupt things a little bit, but I think everybody anticipates a messy procedure anyway. So.
I mean, I don't know. I just think it's interesting. I guess today they're doing the things that you have to do under the impeachment rules, like order someone to send the summons. I don't know why they didn't do it last night, but. They didn't. They're supposed to send a summons. But again, I thought there was a unanimous consent. At least there was an agreement between McConnell and Schumer because they announced dates. Because otherwise, as Politico told us, they have to convene today at 1 o'clock and start the trial.
Yeah, I guess so. Or at least, it's still not clear to me under the rules exactly what has to be done and what doesn't have to be done. If in the absence of any agreement on 1 o'clock after, and it may be that at 1 o'clock today they do, they are obligated to meet and make this the pending business and then enter an agreement or note that an agreement's been entered, or if there is no agreement, start to hash things out. But yeah, it's not.
We're told there's an agreement. I mean, everyone has said that it'll start February 8th with motions to dismiss, and I saw the news.
By that. Yeah, so it has to be right.
And Trump has till February 2nd to answer, which means someone has to serve him the summons, which is part of the rules.
Yeah,
and it seems fair.
That may be all they're obligated to do this afternoon is to note that is happening. And all right, well, we're going to take a quick 1-minute break. We still have some time on the other side if you want to discuss some more. Joan,
I just want to go through the substance a little bit more, but then I'll obviously move aside when Joan comes with good stuff.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando's still with us here and still discussing. There's a lot to discuss yet in this impeachment trial that hasn't even started yet because, there's always issues, obviously. I told him during the break, I see the reporting of BBC reporter Hugo Lowell noting that Eric Swalwell, one of the impeachment managers, says he won't rule out calling, well, they just say generally speaking here, Republican lawmakers. And I assume that he means Republican senators at this point, but it could be, there are certainly members of the House who should be called out on this as well. But Republican lawmakers as Senate trial witnesses to show that Trump incited the insurrection. And then noting, of course, the jurors, included among the 100 jurors are both witnesses and, of course, victims of the high crime and or misdemeanor on trial here. So,
and some were co-actors. The House Republican Representative Mo Brooks, his own language will of course be subject to it. But there are two that you and I have focused on before, and I will do it again. Mike Lee received the phone call from Trump and from Giuliani. And in fact, Mike Lee passed his phone to Tommy Tuberville, who would be another witness who spoke to the president while they were all huddled up and still under lockdown. What did the president say? I would go, and former Republican vice presidents. Mike Pence should be a witness. All of this, by the way, just reinforces my point. Mm-hmm. This should go to a committee.
Yeah, somebody who's got to have the time to unravel all of this. I don't know what their plan is for this. My guess is, like you said, they're probably just planning for something of a floor spectacle. Why, I'm not sure. I don't know that that's necessarily the end of the inquiry, but honestly, I don't know why it would
be the end of the impeachment.
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't want to have the full inquiry. I still think they may be planning to do committee inquiries into various aspects of the attack.
But
why you wouldn't
want
to
go to the impeachment?
Yeah, right. That's.
I think people just.
I guess they can
aren't
end up
thinking
as criminal
about it. I don't know if you. I'm a weirdo, and I looked at the entire report and transcript of the Porteous impeachment.
Okay.
Okay.
Judge.
And the Porteous impeachment, they had 11 committee sessions taking testimony and evidence. The report was 142 pages long, and it made very detailed records. And then there was a presentation before the full Senate of the report and the transcript.
That's how it works. In case.
And there were motions presented. Turley argued for certain things. And
I don't know if everybody's aware of the fact that Jonathan Turley was the defense counsel for Judge Porteous in his impeachment trial, but you were.
And he did pretty poorly by all accounts, which isn't surprising. I don't think he's much of an intellect. I think he's a publicity hound.
Yeah, Porteous was also a terrible client.
Porteous had a very
you were
bad
going to
case.
lose.
Turley actually had a good argument, but it would cut against him now. It seems to me. He argued that Porteous was a crook before and after he became a federal judge. In case you didn't know that, and he was impeached for both periods of behavior. And Turley argued that the behavior before he became a federal judge should not have been considered. I think that's correct for impeachment, if you want to know the truth. But that argument fits into what I'm saying, why former federal officers and presidents are subject to impeachment, because we're only judging them for their time in office. Indeed, that's the John Quincy Adams formulation of the impeachment power. And it's the English formulation as well. For the most part, though, in theory, you can impeach anybody, they said in England, and I guess maybe it happened. But the famous impeachment in England was of Warren Hastings, the former Governor General of India. And, of course, the impeachment manager of the Warren Hastings impeachment was the well-known political scientist and philosopher Edmund Burke. So it's a very famous event, and it was a very famous event at the time of the formation of the Constitution.
Yes, that's why it's important.
And it's going to be argued a lot, and February 9th, you'll hear all about that. So I don't know where I was going, but I know where I was going. The committee is the place to do this.
Yes. Right. And so anybody who had any questions about why committee or wouldn't that be weird? The basics of the procedure are you have this full inquiry in committee where you're not only not taking up Senate floor time and you can get really detailed because, that's your job. And, they're used to handling things like that in committees anyway, very detailed inquiries. And then how do you save it constitutionally? At the end, you do come and present this report. And sometimes it can take days, but you present the findings of the committee to the full Senate, and the full Senate, just like any bill, a committee considers it, and then the full Senate says yes or no to it. So, it's fully constitutional. That's where, and fully tested as well as one judicial impeachment. Walter Nixon was the one who took it all the way to the Supreme Court and said this idea of doing things in committee is unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court said nothing unconstitutional about it at all. The full Senate gave its final thumbs up, thumbs down to the impeachment. That's all that's required. How they, investigate you is up to them.
Well, I'll go further. In courts, there are situations where due process, the whole thing is argued not in front of the judge who makes the final decision, but before a magistrate or a special master who prepares a report and recommendation. The parties get to argue that the magistrate is wrong or right, or this bad thing happened, or this should have happened, and all that gets presented to the judge, and the judge will make a decision on it. So it's not even. Look, and Senate trials are trials anyway.
True.
Nixon was not only did they say he was wrong because the Senate can do whatever he wants, what he argued is pretty consistent with what a evidence gathering could be in a civil process in federal court. It happens all the time. You try a case in front of a special magistrate who writes literally a report and recommendation to the judge. And you can object to the report and recommendation, et cetera, and the judge listens to your arguments about why the magistrate's right or wrong and renders a decision.
Yeah.
So
Similar process here.
It's consistent with what can happen in a court. So I don't get it. And in terms of TV, the Senate, there never was a Watergate impeachment trial. I don't know if people know this. But there were Watergate committees where witnesses were heard. Evidence was gathered.
Yeah.
And they were televised.
And, it is interesting that how many people are occasionally fooled by that and either recall differently, or if they weren't alive, would just assume that, sure, there was an impeachment trial for Richard Nixon. Because I remember seeing, even if it's just in history class or in my history books, all these witnesses and the committees working on it. And so it serves pretty well to establish a record, even when there's no actual trial.
Right. And again, with all due respect, it's also the most due process that you can give Donald Trump.
Yeah. You
don't rush through a 3-day trial. You give it the time. And he can bring in any evidence he wants. And he gets to cross-examine whoever he wants. This is the fairest, most thorough way to do this is through a committee. Because if you do it all on the floor of the House, you're going to rush it, because that's what they always do. They don't take their time when you're tying up the entire Senate.
Yeah. So, it's much wiser to develop the record there. I know that they plan to do this anyway. There'll certainly be Senate committee inquiries into probably directly into the same topic, and then all the tangential topics as well. And I can't believe that the Homeland Security Committee, once they get control of that, and that's another issue to discuss with Joan at some point, controlling the committees. But why wouldn't they want to know, hey, what did happen with the fact that there were no security protocols implemented at the White House? What are they? Can we review them? Are they insufficient? Or is it just that we ignored the fact that the president was directing this attack for some reason?
Yeah. Well, again, it's all going to, it should bloom 100 Benghazis, because there really is a lot to get to on different levels. But in terms of finding out whether you should disqualify Donald Trump from future office, it seems to me that now's the time.
Yes.
Or, basically table the impeachment trial until you finish all those investigations in other committees.
Yeah.
We can come back in July and do it.
Yeah, and I think in everybody's best interest, including a lot of Republicans, for their own personal and political reasons, to know whether or not Donald Trump is an eligible candidate in 2024. And the more time passes between now and 2024, the less stable the American political situation becomes. The whole point of dealing with this in an impeachment setting is that it should not only complete the record, but close the books on the Trump era, or declare that they're still open, and alert everyone to the danger of this. And you should want an answer from this. But as a Republican, you should want an answer to this.
Right. But then realistically speaking, what's going to happen, there almost certainly aren't 17 votes to convict unless there's something extremely compelling. Again, the record as it sits isn't producing 17. So when Eric Swalwell and Chris Coons say it's an open and shut case, well, you know what? It isn't to get conviction in the Senate. So if your intent is to actually provide a complete record that might compel conviction,
yes, right,
you need to do it a different way than they're planning.
That's probably true. And I think any Republican, rank and file grassroots Republican, can endure 3 days of embarrassment. Can they endure 6 months of, God, every day there's a new story about how much worse this thing is?
Well, I hadn't thought about it before, but now that you put it that way, it does remind that Nixon went through all that. And, of course, then there were more revelations and there were court cases going on.
Yes.
But the reality is, Nixon wasn't chipped away in a day or 3 or 6 or even 6 months.
Yeah,
it
Greg
took a year.
Us this all the time. Yeah, and I mean, I guess everybody figured that the terrible 4 years, and especially bad last year of the Trump presidency, stood in for that, but it hasn't convinced enough senators. I mean, we're just simply not in the same position as we were at the end of the Watergate inquiry, where the Republican senators went to him and said, you are going to lose. You are going to be removed from office if this goes to trial. So it's time for you to leave. And we haven't developed that. We may never develop it among senators, but I guess even if we don't, is there really, no, even just purely political value to developing the case such that it's going to be a test? There are going to be states where Republican voters are just too embarrassed to return a stalwart Republican senator to the Senate at some point. Not very many, but marginally a few.
The voters should have the opportunity to make that judgment on that senator. Look, there's an important issue here. I mean, this is the most heinous act, in my opinion. Maybe you have a different view. To me, this is the most heinous act against the American system that any president has ever done.
Yeah, I can't think of what compares to
right
to doing this.
So again, the idea that, well, he's gone now, so let's forget about it, it's just remarkable. I mean, let's just then amend the Constitution and take impeachment out. Because then you're never going to do it.
Right. Well, they're doing it by
you're never
going to
threaten
anyway.
it, and it's never going to be over anyone's head ever.
Yeah. And I mean, we may already have been there even without this incident, just because, I mean, the first impeachment kind of tells us that.
Well, yeah, I think that's number 2 probably on the list. I do think Nixon was terrible, but I still think he's probably number 3.
Yeah, I think so.
He's number 3 of the 3 impeachments that you're talking. And you want to. The fourth, to me, you can argue about whether Johnson was worse than Clinton. I would say Johnson was worse than Clinton because I don't think what Clinton did really involved a high crime or misdemeanor. It was a tawdry misdemeanor. It was a tawdry political misdemeanor. And then a lie in a civil deposition, which happens every day across the United States of America, because
people can get away with it.
The whole argument there is not treating him equally, because if he wasn't president in a civil case and they allowed him to be sued, nobody would think twice. Oh, the guy lied in a civil deposition on workplace harassment or whatever the case was about. So that's not even. I mean, that's a joke, and that's why just my personal hobby horse is to denounce Jonathan Turley every day, because he argued for impeaching Clinton because of that.
Yeah.
And then argued that Trump shouldn't be impeached for the things he did, which, I mean, there's just no credible way you can argue that. It's like William Bennett, who was the end of outrage or the death of outrage guy. How can you not be outraged about what Clinton did? And then he's a big Trumpster now, as you probably know. The Book of Virtues guy. So it's hard to believe that you can just say, well, it's too late now to address the most serious attack by the president on our system of government in the history of the country. It's just unfathomable. And even if you think on a technicality, I'd love to convict him, but the Constitution says I can't. Okay, well, make that speech, but then you're going to have to address what he did. Mm-hmm. If you really think that, because the reality is there's disqualification.
You would think. I mean, why no speech about, well, the Constitution prohibits this, but what a tragedy, because this is the clearest example of a high crime I can imagine a president committing, beyond not simply taking him up literally on his word, but he's shooting people himself literally on Fifth Avenue. That would be presumably worse, although I guess if it would be to rise to this level, he'd have to shoot senators on Fifth Avenue, I guess. But
it is very shooting the vice president and the Speaker of the House.
Right.
And
that's also a part of my argument about the security protocols that I neglected to include in there is there's no answer from the Secret Service when the second, third, and fourth in line to succession to the presidency are under physical threat and assassination attempts currently. That really there's just nothing you don't even turn the president's TV off and say, come on, pay attention.
Yeah, it just to be crassly political, let's say I'm a Democrat. You know what? I'm just being cynical, and I don't really think these things matter that much, but I want to make maximum political advantage. Wouldn't you want Republican senators to have to react day after day at what's uncovered in the impeachment committee?
Yes, certainly. Right.
Yeah, so 3 weeks of nonstop shocking stuff.
Yeah, and this is currently being developed by, journalists. Now, give journalists subpoena power. What might they be able to uncover? Well, Probably a lot.
They're the experts. They hold office. I don't. I'm just a blabbermouth. But there are things I do know that I think they maybe don't know as well, at least in terms of how evidence impacts people, juries or a judge, and how it's presented and things like that. And I just don't think
sometimes
they are great
really
at that type of presentation or thinking about it.
But certainly lots of people with valid complaints about their messaging abilities of all sorts. So it wouldn't surprise me that this messaging might escape them as well.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just have reasons that they don't disclose.
Yeah, you have Joan coming up, so I'll wrap up and then listen to you. But I do think fundamentally, forget about everything else. It's too important to rush it like this in 3 days. It's too important to not gather all the evidence to know what he really did. It's too important that our elected officials do not have to address it and say what they think about this. To me, a little 3-day show, and it'll be effective, don't get me wrong, but it's not treating it with the seriousness it deserves. And an impeachment committee makes sense for dealing with what it is we are talking about, this activity, this insurrection, and the president's fomenting of it. Yes, there's other arguments for committee, and I've made them, which is the Senate keeps it going on with this business. And I think those are valid. But just independently of all that, for necessity, the House could not do a deep impeachment inquiry. It didn't have that capability. But that doesn't mean the Senate doesn't get to do a full-fledged trial the way you would do it in court. Not every case in court or in arbitration has a lot of Lots of times, to just give you an example, in arbitration, you do a quick exchange of discovery, you don't take depositions, and you show up for trial by combat, as Rudy Giuliani would say.
Okay.
And you take the time you need to develop your record. That's where the Senate is now. Because of the exigencies of how the House had to handle it to try to impeach and address him and have him removed immediately, they didn't have the time to do a 3-month, what Turley calls, we had to do a snap impeachment. Yes, there was a reason it had to be a snap impeachment, because the facts that were available to us were enough to impeach. But now he's no longer in office. The urgency for a snap conviction isn't there. So let's do it right.
Yes, right. And he was relying, of course, there on the usual conflation people have between the actual impeachment in the House versus trial in the Senate, and just referring to it all as impeachment. You can't do it all as a snap impeachment. In the trial phase, I agree, even though that appears to be not only what's happening, but probably what Turley would argue for if he were defending Trump. Is our best hope is to have the trial quick and not let people develop a full picture of what's going on. But as a defense attorney in the first instance, you can't indict him very quickly. even though that's
all
the
this,
easiest thing
I
to
mean,
do.
here's the trap at the end of the day. Okay, so whatever happens here, we do this fast. And then the investigations and people were all, let's turn the page. We lived through this before, David. You know it.
Yeah.
You argued. I was wrong. And that's why I'm saying we can't let this go. And it's even worse. George W. Bush wasn't a threat for retaking office. Dick Cheney wasn't a threat for retaking office.
Right.
There is a live and present danger that the next nominee of the Republican Party, who will have at least 40 to 45% chance of winning, maybe not, say 40 for the sake of argument, that he could become president again. The most dangerous man in the history of the country could be president again. And we're not going to take the time to consider whether we shouldn't allow that?
Yes. I can't believe that that's the case, but apparently, yeah, that's where we are. And it's I mean, we're talking about the next Republican nominee could be the last one there ever is. I mean, make the guy president again. How does he not take that as validation of the attack on the Capitol?
Exactly.
I mean,
why wouldn't he say,
right,
like he did in Ukraine, I can do it again? He did not learn his lesson. And
Susan
if
Collins.
we don't exact, and by the way, that doesn't mean don't impeach him. That means convict and disqualify him. But at the very least, make the people who don't convict and disqualify him have to face the political price of doing that.
Yeah.
Make them pay the political consequences. And if that means if we have to just make it that way, then people have to decide, I am for insurrection and lawlessness and fascism. Well, then that's the battle we have, and we go battle it.
Yeah.
But let's do it.
I don't know. I mean, it is interesting, just amazing to think about the people among the Republican senators who think they're still running for president in 2024, but still afraid to convict and bar Donald Trump, not only just for political reasons, but I mean, what are you going to do in a debate with Donald Trump in 2024 or 2023 when the primaries are just getting started and he stands up there and says, you basically stood up in front of the Senate and said, I am the president now and I should have been the president for the past 4 years, but I'm coming back to claim this thing. You think you can compete against me? You said I should be president. You said I should have been president the last 4 years. And now what? You've changed your mind? Why are we supposed to believe this? Now you say you're against me. I don't think so. Just to get in line.
I mean, my own belief is that Trump is the if he runs, no one will run against him. They will not. He will not have a single opponent.
I don't see how you do it. I don't see how you get up there and say, yeah, I was fine with his attacking the Capitol to try and extend his presidency, but I disagree with him over tariff policy. and that's what you people really care about. I think we could do a different mix of approach to future energy development. What would be the differentiation? So I guess he's clearing the field. But to vote to, it's amazing that, of course, they're saying, well, I'm going to vote against convicting him because I don't want to lose the possibility of winning his base. Well, when? When are you going to win his base? It's not going to be 2024. And if he's president again and finds out there's no particular price for storming the Capitol, are you like, well, I'll run in 2028 because then he'll be barred because he'll have been elected twice, and he respects the Constitution. So at least I'm saving myself for 2028. You're not saving yourself for anything. And when he dies, I assume at that point the kids fight about which one of them becomes president, not to run for president, but just takes it. Because what are you going to do? Count the electoral votes to get me out? I don't think so. I mean, what do you do if you can't count the damn electoral votes? Right? Yeah, you had a whole election. I don't know what you're wasting your time for. I didn't even run for it, and I don't have any electoral votes, but who cares? The point is, if you try to count somebody else's electoral votes, I'll kill you, and it's okay. Oh, we think it's not okay. Yeah, all right, well, whatever. If you're dead, you're dead. We'll see.
Yeah. But we will see how that turns out.
Yeah.
Apparently, it turned out well for Schumer yesterday, so I will leave you to discuss that with Joan after the break. And thanks for letting me indulge a little bit on this impeachment thing, which obviously is a bit of an obsession.
Yeah, well,
me.
It's got to be for everybody at this point. And reading about it in the newspapers isn't going to help you very much. So that's why we do this thing here. Thanks, Armando. Right. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon, I am sure. And yeah, after our 2-minute break, we'll be hearing from Joan probably right away, and probably during the break we'll set everything up, make sure everything's working, and get to talking about all the things maybe that we said we were going to talk about last week, unless we find new stuff to obsess over. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando is out the door and Joan is in the door. And I do have notes to myself that we said we were going to talk about reconciliation. We may have to touch on that at some point, but we, of course, have more immediate problems. I don't know whether we assumed last week that we would have the organization of the Senate straightened out by now, or whether we knew that there was going to be a problem already last week. It's hard to tell whether we knew this or not. But we've got still an issue of settling the rules going forward for the 117th Congress in the Senate, including a fight about the filibuster. And I am unclear where we stand at the moment. I know that Schumer spent time during the last week or so insisting that he was not going to give in to Mitch McConnell's demand for some kind of formal or otherwise agreement from Democrats not to attempt to change, we'll be precise in our language, change the interpretations of the rules such that the filibuster practice changed in any way during the next 2 years, during the 117th Congress. And Schumer just, and I think rightly, honestly, said, I can't give you that promise, and it's actually, improper for you to ask me to do it, but just to be honest, now I don't know what you guys are going to do during the next 2 years, so I'm not going to make you that promise. But somehow, of course, it's been framed as his being somehow shifty and not discussing whether or not the change will be made, and that's just, I think, a success in framing from McConnell and Republicans.
Because McConnell always knows the DC media. Always.
Yeah, you've pointed that out. I think you're absolutely right here. And this is the best illustration of it. I mean, he's saying, I want you to promise me that you're not going to change the filibuster rules. And although I haven't seen Schumer say, I want you to promise me that you're not going to filibuster and make me change the rules, but
right.
That should have been implicit in it. And it's always been a part of agreements on things like that in the past. Gang of 14, that was the promise. We won't change the rules.
Not in the organizing resolution, however.
Yeah, that's true. And it didn't, I don't know whether McConnell would have in the end insisted that it be in writing in there, but I guess that was his first ask.
He wanted it somehow formally expressed in the organizing resolution, which, as we talked about before, because this came up last week. McConnell or Schumer could just say, yeah, well, things change.
Yeah.
It's always the prerogative of the majority leader to say, we're changing the rules anyway. It would have been harder to bring along maybe really now just to a cinema and mansion. Mm-hmm. If they made an explicit promise in the organizing resolution, it would be harder to get those two to relent.
I'm sure.
It's going to be hard anyway, because this is how Schumer got McConnell to eventually relent. They are going to organize on the precedent set in the 2001 organizing resolution for the 50-50 Senate. They're going to use 2001. McConnell has relented to that.
All right.
After Manchin and Sinema said, no, there's no way we'll ever end the filibuster.
Yeah. And I mean, that's as good as they was going to get. So
they made their public pronouncements. It's not formally in the organizing resolution. We move forward to the next time when Mitch McConnell blocks something, and it'll be something really popular and important, like the Voting Rights Act. And then we'll have to revisit Manchin and Sinema and their upholding of what President Obama calls a Jim Crow relic.
Yeah. Well,
it'd be rather fitting for that to be the bill that ended it.
Yeah.
The Voting Rights Act.
Yes, that's true. That would be very fitting. We'll see whether that moves either of them. I'm not 100% sure how compelled they feel to defend it, but I mean, at heart, generally speaking, they're Democrats and they win where they win, in large part. Well, I don't know so much for Manchin, but clearly, I think it's now easy to make the case for Sinema that remaining in office requires strict adherence to voting rights. But
I would think so after 2020 in Arizona.
Yeah, I would think so. I haven't really got the evidence for that for West Virginia.
Yeah.
But still, it's one of those puzzlements about Manchin. I'm less sure about like Sinema and what goes on in her head, but Manchin, while he's an annoyance, is still, he does what he does because he's still determined to govern as a Democrat in West Virginia, and that's not easy to do all the time. Sinema, I don't know what she wants to spend her time on besides, training for Ironman triathlons. For Sinema, Manchin's West Virginia, you can sort of understand. It feels to me like Sinema is just kind of an attention hog. I guess, I don't know. She's she's enigmatic, let's say, and
yes,
whatever. I don't know. She just hasn't been around long enough to really know enough about her, and she keeps a low profile for somebody who's such an attention hog. She does grab it on big spectacular issue.
She's, let's say, changeable.
Yeah,
I don't think that really she has a whole lot that she believes strongly in.
That could be. Yeah, I don't know. So she's harder to predict. But on the other hand, a better argument for on the politics, if she wants to stay in office, and who knows, maybe she really doesn't care. I can't even tell that. But the politics are such that, you're going to want to be in the right place on the Voting Rights Act in Arizona. I don't even know when she's up for election, but really as soon as possible.
There could also be an LGBTQ issue that comes up that
that too.
You would think, as a openly bisexual senator, the first, that would matter to her. So we'll see. Barb just alerted me to the latest I don't know what from Mitch McConnell, who in his floor statement this morning, responding to Schumer's crowing about finally getting his organizing resolution.
Yeah.
He noted that in a 50-50 Senate, it takes 51 senators to establish a quorum, and one can be demanded by one senator at any time. And that's true about Senate committees as well, where a GOP senator will be needed for a quorum.
Okay. And this is McConnell's floor statement?
This is McConnell's floor statement. A tweet from Jamie Dupree.
Okay. So...
Which, is...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not certain what so I guess he's saying, all right, he could deny the Senate a quorum to do business by absenting all 50 Republicans during a quorum call, which I guess is of some interest, although I guess I would point out that if you're absenting all 50 senators in an attempt to deny a quorum, you're also leaving yourself vulnerable to any unanimous consent requests that might be made. And if nobody's on the floor to object either to the unanimous consent request or note the absence of a quorum, a unanimous consent request goes through, and it's assumed that there's a quorum. So, I don't know. I suppose he's going to have to be providing that one Republican on the floor all the time, though then they can run away during a quorum call.
I guess so. I mean,
guess.
Is this McConnell saying he's going to have somebody on the floor at all times? Is this McConnell
normally they
threatening
would anyway,
that they're going to have Kamala Harris on the floor at all times or in the chair? I don't.
I don't know. I'm not certain what it is. I think it's just supposed to make us sweat because I suppose if he puts one, and they would normally have a Republican hanging around at all times anyway. So if they object, or if they say, I note the absence of a quorum, and then intend to run away so that only 50 senators can answer the quorum call, and it's not a quorum, and they have to suspend business. I mean, what do you do when at that point, as soon as the one Republican runs away, somebody else says, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the quorum call. Well, hearing no objection, it's suspended. And then the guy has to come back and note the absence of a quorum and then run away again. I guess he could spend all day doing that, but I don't know how well that goes over. So I'm not certain that it's a big threat, really, but I don't know. Well,
he's trying to make it be a threat, I think.
Yes. Well, it's also I guess you want to return to that. You can.
He also said that eliminating the filibuster would not be some progressive dream. It would be a nightmare, I guarantee it. So he's in threat mode.
Yeah. All right. Well, it could be a nightmare later in the next Congress or wherever you retake the majority. Of course, and maybe it becomes harder to do if we can pass a Voting Rights Act. But
presumably what happens is that he tries to filibuster something really, really popular, like, I don't know, $15 minimum wage. And we end up having to force through really, really popular legislation that makes it a lot easier to elect more Democrats in 2022 or 2024. So,
well,
it's McConnell threatening whatever he can threaten.
But no longer threatening the organizing resolution itself.
No longer threatening the organizing resolution.
All right. Well, that's. I guess that's progress. Although I was getting excited about the prospect of proving out that the committees.
I know you did a lot of work on that yesterday.
Well, yeah. I track that stuff every year. They're trying to organize because I guess the upshot of it is. People should be aware that McConnell threatens to filibuster the organizing resolution a lot. I mean, people thought that this is the first time it's ever, but it's not even the first time McConnell's done it. And that McConnell's first act as Republican leader in taking over from Bill Frist was to threaten the organizing resolution. And if you want to know just what a scumbag, Mitch McConnell is, quick history of it was that in December 2006, after the 2006 elections, Democrats stood to have 51 seats in the Senate. So, again, closely divided. And he thought that they would, he didn't want to countenance the loss of Republican control in the Senate and in the committees, so said he was going to filibuster the organizing resolution because in December of 2006, Senator Tim Johnson was in the hospital after a brain aneurysm, and he had brain surgery, and it was unclear at this point, though, whether or not Tim Johnson was going to live. And McConnell, in December of 2006, said, already scheming, well, if they're supposed to have 51 seats and he dies and the governor of South Dakota is a Republican, it'll be a 50-50 Senate when Johnson dies. So I'm going to filibuster the organizing resolution and insist on an even split in the committees. anticipating Johnson's death. Wow. Johnson didn't die, by the way. He should have come back and, beat the crap out of McConnell. But who knows what kind of shape he was in. I'll have somebody else beat the crap out of McConnell for trying to filibuster an organizing resolution while I'm in the hospital recovering. And then to follow that act up in 2008, following the next set of elections when Republicans got clobbered and there was a huge Senate majority coming in for Democrats, he threatened to filibuster the organizing resolution again, even though it was going to be like a 57-43 Senate, because at that point Democrats said, well, we're going to expand our majorities on the committees. And he said, no, it should remain, 1 or 2 majority on the committees, not 3. And he was going to filibuster over that. It's habitual for him, in other words.
It's habitual. And somehow he still manages to get the DC press to portray it as both sides of gridlock.
Yes.
He's an extortionist.
Yeah. I have urged Democrats to filibuster.
His history on this is very
time.
clear. Yeah. Talking about taking the debt ceiling and, the global economy hostage. It's a hostage worth ransoming, he said, out loud, in public.
Right. This is something he does all the time, and Democrats won't. They never. I've urged them, while they still have the possibility, to filibuster Republican organizing resolutions, and they think it's beyond the pale, out of the question, not done. Not done. He keeps doing it to you. Yeah. So that's a little bit of sad commentary on Democrats and the press and both sidesism for sure. But I guess now he says he's not going to do it, but it's the threat that counts. So I guess they'll get their committees organized, and Sinema is saved for having done no work on this. She gets the gavel. I think she stands in line to inherit the gavel in 2 subcommittees. I can't remember whether the rules will permit her to take both, but one of them is allegedly important to her. She wouldn't do any of the heavy lifting to ensure that she got it, although she may think that she arranged for it by, informally promising that the filibuster would remain, and that's what freed things up. But she wouldn't line up to do the work of it, but she's going to be gifted a gavel anyway. We'll see whether that stands.
This from McConnell has created lots of questions among Daily Kos staff. Like from Marcos, who wants to know on a quorum call, do all 50 Republicans need to be there, or can Rand Paul call one every day by his lonesome self? Does it only work to delay if every Republican is president? Present. Yes, every Republican has to be present. So does every Democrat, right? If you're doing a live quorum call, they all have to show up.
No. Well, they don't. 51 of them have to show up.
Right.
All 50 Democrats and 1 Republican would have to show up in order to establish a quorum. But again, if they're all hiding from the quorum call, you can just ask the quorum call be dispensed with.
Right.
So,
I mean, it's essentially McConnell saying, I will have all 50 Republicans there at any given time to screw with you, right? Isn't that sort of the implied threat?
I don't know whether he has to do that. I think he just has to have a couple around. If the threat is, well, I'm going to suggest an absence of a quorum and then force you to produce a quorum, and if you don't, like if no Republicans answer the quorum call and all 50 Democrats do, and they decide, all right, well, that's 50, not a majority, and therefore not a quorum, the Senate would have to adjourn, at least temporarily, until they can establish that there's a quorum. So I guess they could block progress on bills without filibustering them by suggesting the absence of a quorum and then disappearing. But again, the balance, the problem with disappearing is somebody can ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be stopped. And although, I guess technically a Republican can stay on the floor and refuse to answer when his name is called in a quorum call, but be there to object to unanimous consent to suspending the quorum call. And so I suppose they could do that. But, that would require 49 Republican senators hiding from quorum calls, which, again, if it's a live quorum call and you're talking about suspending operations in the Senate, then you can use the sergeant at arms. And all you have to do is find one, and you can literally pick him up and carry him onto the Senate floor. And in case people have forgotten, yes, they've done that in living memory. Bob Packwood, I think, who had his own problems.
Yes, it was Bob Packwood. He was hiding in his bathroom.
Yeah, which would be pretty amazing.
Another question.
Yeah.
Harris can't break a quorum tie, right?
I don't think so, only because I'm pretty sure that it has to be, senators answering the quorum call. On the other hand, if Harris is there to say, if you really wanted to screw around with it, I know the precedents say and the rules say that it's got to be senators, but I say it doesn't. And if you think otherwise and you want to come and overrule my ruling, you're going to have to show up to vote. Because otherwise it's going to be 50 votes in favor. Or if we frame the point of order correctly, so that you can lose it and still prevail.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more difficult. Although what he's beginning to frame up here is, and he's sort of paving the way for Democrats to say, all right, well, let's apply these rules across the board. And we haven't gotten rid of the filibuster, but from now on, there's going to be you get to speak no more than twice, and we'll apply all the rules and force talking filibusters, which we've worked out in the past is entirely doable without changing the rules. And you're going to have to show up and talk, and otherwise leave someone on the floor. If you're already going to do it anyway, leave someone on the floor at all times. We'll just keep asking whether other senators wish to speak. And if no one wants to be recognized to speak, then you get to call a vote. And if it's the same person, they can't be called on to speak twice. So you're going to have to rotate. There's going to have to be a schedule. You can leave one Republican on the floor at all times, but everybody's going to have to take shifts. And every time Democrats say no other speakers, you're going to have to switch people. So it's going to be tough.
This is what I was thinking. It's McConnell making a threat that he can't necessarily back up.
You may be right about that. So
having his Republicans all there all the time to
or at
participate in this.
Yeah, so you might be right after all that they don't have to all be on the floor, but some critical mass of them are going to have to be available to race to the floor and seek recognition if the designated floor watcher has already spoken during a filibuster.
Right.
So, all right. I knew you were right somehow.
McConnell being McConnell also said the same thing about Senate committees. Which, Graham threw out the window in the Amy Coney Barrett hearings.
Oh, yeah, that's true, too.
Confirmation.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, good point there. Now we have that precedent, and I guess they can lean on it when the chairs say, well, we can't produce a quorum, but I learned last Congress from Senator Graham that doesn't matter. Awesome. All right. Yeah, well, they did a lot more work for us than they thought, I guess.
It could just be McConnell blustering because he's mad that he had to give in on this. I don't know.
It could be, but
we will see. He's got to be aware that anything he does to try to blow up means that the filibuster probably ends up being blown up.
Yeah, right. Something somewhere out there is going to piss off Sinema and Manchin, and there may be yet ways around it. And I was wondering whether there are things that we could have. It does say that they wouldn't agree to vote for a nuclear option style change of rules in the filibuster, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't use it for changing the rules around something else. And you might
there could be lots of mini nukes out there.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have to see what is it that, and I guess that Republicans are determined to find out. what can we block that will be the last straw for Manchin and Sinema? You know, there may be nothing, but then we'll learn something important about Manchin and Sinema. Or it could be something, in which case they'll learn something important about, the two of them as well, and lose their ability to do it again. So I guess we wait and see. I don't know.
Wait and see.
Yeah, all right.
Not
So
just-
he threatened something, and it may just never come to pass, but we'll see. In the meantime, I don't know. Did you want to get around to what was up with reconciliation, or did we just
Well,
wait
reconciliation looks like it's going to happen
Okay,
on the COVID relief bill.
that's what they'll use it for. Okay.
That's what Yarmouth is working toward. He thinks it could come to John Yarmouth, who is chair of which committee?
Budget in
Finance.
Is he?
Budget, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
House budget chair.
In the House is getting that ready right now, says it could come to the floor as soon as next week, which sort of gets into the discussion that you were having with Armando about impeachment.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be hard to do those parallel tracks because if the House does it next week, then it's the week after for the Senate, and that's when impeachment's beginning. So
Yeah, and I guess
anyway, we're looking at reconciliation, and they're even going to try to get the $15 minimum wage into the reconciliation bill.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing to do normally, but I guess they'll be interested in pushing the boundaries of the Byrd rule and its interpretation, either with the old parliamentarian or a new one if necessary.
Yeah.
Huh.
There's precedent for that. So,
Okay.
did we talk about reconciliation enough last week to sort of lay the groundwork?
I think so. I mean, actually, it kind of came up at the end, but I think everybody is familiar with, generally speaking, what it is and then how it. It's important because limited debate, and so therefore not subject to the filibuster.
Right.
But that, you're limited. It's supposed to be limited to what you put in it.
It's Congress saying, okay, we have to come up with our broad budget outlines and setting the limits or ceilings, I guess, floors or ceilings for spending bills for these purposes. And this is the number you have to meet, and go committees, draft your bills for this one reconciled bill, which will contain all of the COVID relief stuff. And most of it does affect either revenue or spending, which is the limit set by Byrd rule.
Yes.
And, some folks are saying, well, you could make the argument that the $50 minimum wage could fit under that, and if it doesn't, will overrule the parliamentarian. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll see how far they have to go. But yeah, it is a really accelerated schedule. I guess we did mention at the end of the last show that this would be moving quicker, but because it's going to contain COVID relief, they want to do that as soon as possible. And reconciliation is something we're usually talking about in the spring rather than at this point. And they're going to I guess they kind of have to reverse the budget process, or I think what I saw that they might do is pass some sort of like placeholder shell budget first.
Yeah.
So that the runway is clear for a reconciliation bill.
And that's pretty much what I think they've been talking about. And now we'll be able to have the Senate committees to move forward with that. Sanders is on board with reconciliation. Importantly, Biden is on board with reconciliation, if that's how it has to be.
Okay. That is important. He's no longer in the Senate, of course, Joe Biden, but
no.
Yes, it's important.
You've got to have a president justifying it. So
Absolutely. And, we pushed for that for a long time under the Obama administration. Didn't always get our way with that, but interesting. So now on board, so that helps clear the way for other Democratic senators to be on board. But yeah, I guess we are going to have to come back to this a lot and probably have to do a lot of explainers as time goes on. and the process moves. But if they move it quick enough in between shows, maybe we'll be off the hook.
It could be a done deal. Who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, I appreciate it. Well, I have a feeling we'll be back on it next week, but we won't have to worry about the organization of committees. The filibuster's future will still be up in the air, but no worse off than it has been to this point. It's just a big question mark. Do they piss off Manchin and Sinema? Okay. You know, if that's their goal, quite honestly, if they wanted to spend their time looking for ways to piss off Manchin and Sinema, I guess I say, well, that's unfortunate for you two. But, you know, I guess that's the way it is. The entire party has decided to test your limits. Not us, it's them. See what you want to say to that. Okay. All right, this could be exciting. Well, hopefully we catch up with you again next week.
Kagro, always fun times in the 21st century.
Yes. Well, glad I could answer some questions. We'll see you next week.
All right, thanks.
Take care.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
That was quite interesting. A little bit of behind-the-scenes work. I don't know. I should get charged for this consultancy. Marcos has questions. Barb has questions. All right. Well, it's fun to answer them. More questions to be answered next, upcoming on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam next. Chief among them, hey, what's up and on your agenda? Find out next.